national single windows in ASEAN. And having an ASW initiative has created, from where I stand, a spirit of competition between the national single windows. And I haven't seen another region, and my private sector panelists can correct me if I'm wrong, where there are more national single windows that are trying to provide the best services they can to the private sector. And to then try to connect these national single windows in a regional architecture to exchange cargo clearance data is also a unique initiative to the region. So what are the possible benefits that we're talking about? So benefits can accrue to both private sector businesses as well as government. For the private sector, if this ASW and its national single windows work well, it helps to improve supply chain management in the region, help to integrate the region better. It will support pre-arrival processing of information. You can imagine when data is flowing electronically, that would be the case. It would support track and trace, which is one of the most important features of this ASW and NSW framework. For government, obviously, you have data that's exchanged. If you picture, for example, certificates of origin that no longer have to be mailed, but they can be exchanged electronically between issue and agency of one country into customs of another country, where they don't have to have a magnifying glass to check whether the stamp is valid and authentic. And that's just one example. You have certificates of origin, possibly customs declaration being exchanged. Phytosanitary certificates, we can talk a little bit about when we get to Indofood's presentation. The possibilities are endless. One can visualize all sorts of things. So what is the broad or end vision, if you will, for ASW? What are we picturing? In my view, at least, and maybe ASW is not there to solve all the world's problems. We can't solve problems of logistics, for example, or making roads wider, or helping with the transport issues. But is it possible to envision a world or an ASEAN with paperless clearance? I think ASW begins to allow us to think in those terms. I don't think that it would happen by 2015, but I think we are seeing a lot of progress in that direction. Both having national single windows in place and an IT architecture and a legal architecture that's beginning to take shape in ASEAN. One use in particular of the ASW to support seamless movement of goods in ASEAN. With that, let me quickly introduce Ms. Marian Wong, our speaker. She's currently Senior Assistant Director of Customs with the Royal Malaysian Customs. She has more than 10 years of experience in IT while managing the in-house customs system of the Royal Malaysian Customs Department in the late 1900s and early 2000s. She's currently attached to the Customs Division at headquarters of Malaysian Customs, and she was part of the expert team that worked on the ASEAN Customs Transit System feasibility study. She has been actively involved in all sorts of trade facilitation single window issues over the past 10 years. She's currently the chair of the ASEAN Single Window Working Group on Technical Matters. She's been doing that since 2007. With that, I'd like to invite Ms. Marian Wong to give her remarks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Dr. Lim, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you. I hope that after lunch you are able to keep awake and bear with me for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah. So basically this afternoon, what I'm going to bring you through is I'll give you an example. I'll pick an example on the transit system to show you how the ASW is able to to help in a seamless movement of goods. So basically, the outline of my presentation, I will give you a simple definition of ASW. Yeah, and also I will show you the endorsed architecture that ASEAN Technical Working Group has worked on and has been endorsed by the MS. And then next I will bring you to show you what is actually the role of the ASW and NSW in terms of movement of cargo. And what is it cross-border information exchange about in terms of through the ASW environment? And obviously, ASW is, I think we can consider is the first one, a regional single window in the world so far that we have not seen. So in fact, everyone is looking at us, how we are going to move on to a regional single window. All of us have, I think, seen a lot of national single window. And I believe some of you also have heard about maybe some regional initiative in South Africa that is coming up, for a regional single window. But those initiatives, I understand that is mostly initiated by the private sector. But this ASEAN single window is very much from the government sector, driven by the government sector, right? And of course, because of that, this is the first one. And regional single window, we bound to face a lot of challenges. So I will share with you some of the challenges, yeah. And with that challenges, how we in ASEAN or the member states are going to move forward towards 2015, the realization of the ASEAN Economic Community. Yeah. So this is a very simple definition of ASW. We define the ASW is not so much of a system. Yeah, it is rather is a secure environment where the 10 NSWs will integrate and operate. And it is a regional facility, considered as a facility to enable a seamless and standardized, harmonized routing of communication or trade and custom related information and data for custom clearance and release from N2 NSWs. So there's another point to note that for the ASW, we will not have a centralized database for the trade data. Yeah, so in fact, there was quite a long debate, on where we are going to host the trade data. So at last, the AMS and also the legal people decided that the single window shouldn't be hosting data that does not belong to them. Because once you have a centralized database for trade data, who is going to host the regional database? And if, let's say, we have this information, anticipated arrival of information, pass over to the country of B, that's the receiving, yeah? And then the truck start moving, okay? That means here, I'm showing you like, if you are the receiving end, you are able to get that information before the cargo arrive. You are able to do something, to do assessment, risk assessment, and if, let's say, there's no risk at all, then at the border, you don't even have to check. Because some of the traders, when you do, let's say, this scenario may be like an import and export. Yeah, you cross a land border. Some of the traders, they have to carry the goods right to the warehouse. Then only you unload it. You don't actually need to to be inspected at the border. And you don't have to unload and load it at the border. So if you have that, that would be good. So, and then when the goods arrive here, right, there could be an inspection. And you're talking about, let's say, right to the warehouse. From the border to the warehouse, I know that in some member states, they even have a separate document to carry the goods, because if, let's say, from country A, you cannot use the declaration declared in country A at the border of country B. So you need to declare a declaration, and you don't clear your goods at the border, you have to have a movement of cargo declaration to move into a warehouse. Right. So if, let's say, you can avoid all this, when at the border, at the warehouse, you can inspect and get your goods inspected there, and you have your arrival information. The control result is whether, there's a discrepancy or not when you compare, with the original declaration. Then, when you send it back to the country A, if any security or whatever, then it can be released. Now here, I'm talking about 2 countries. If let's say you have 2 countries, even without a single window, you are able to do that. What I'm trying to say that if let's say you have 2 custom administration with a bilateral agreement, I can hope like what you call integrate your two system. You are able to do it. But what if this transaction involve more than 2 countries, like transit, that in between you have one country, in transit, like from A to B to C, or the country of transit more than 1, right? So if that is the case, you'll see that a single window will give you the advantage, right, of cross-border business process. And like I say here, restriction, that is one of the challenge, and financial support. So now, actually, like even the SCTS, our infrastructure to move on to another next step, we are still looking for funding, right? And that's it. Because funding, is very, otherwise everything will stand still. At this stage, I believe that it's very difficult to get what you call contribution by the private sector right away. You will not contribute something that you have not seen the real benefit or the real implementation of the ASW. So that's why we really need some sponsorship on that. So with this, that is the way forward. Of course, we will have some awareness program and identify business process and for the business process analysis, and and then the capacity building at the regional level and the national level. And lastly will be consultation. This is very important. I think everywhere you go, the private sector will say that we need to be consulted. So this is very important. And yesterday, I think is the first one where we had our ASW Symposium, where we have actually quite a number of private sector people attended, and we have consultation with them to get their view. Yeah. So this is really lastly. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Great presentation. If I may now call on our panelists, starting with Mr. Michael Kian, Director for Regional Logistics at Levi Strauss Asia Pacific Division. Let's see, Mr. Kian directs transportation of finished goods to more than a dozen markets in the Asia Pacific Division. In that role, he's overall responsible for transportation, warehousing, customs and trade management strategies to improve cost efficiencies and service levels, as well as meet complex business requirements. Mr. Kian, word is yours.
Thank you, Rashid. Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, from a private sector perspective, we're very encouraged to see this work happening. In my opinion, if you asked me probably two years ago, I would have been very skeptical. But I think there's still a lot of things that we need to do. And I think these are some of the following to make it operationalize it, and we see some tangible progress by the time we get to 2015. Maybe not all. I think some have been mentioned by Marianne, but allow me to maybe repeat some of them. I think it's very important that we get together, maybe form a task force, both from the public and the private sector, to look at business process analysis, because we're looking at several member countries where decades of different practices and ways of working. And for this to go forward, which Marianne had elaborated on the secured environment, which is a standard way of doing things, which removes complexity and simplify things. You need to get everybody on the same page, on the same platform, and own it. And also, I think we need to also agree on what data we should standardize and harmonize. Because right now, as many of us know, there's still a lot of what we call field operations interpretation to the final 4 digits of the harmonized codes. And it's creating, I think, sometimes quite a lot of headaches, delays, confusion, I think misperceptions about how customs operate the borders. And of course, we've got to quickly shift our gears up a bit to move towards paperless. I think that would help a lot to do that. But I also at the same time recognize that there's a lot of challenges. Like Marianne said yesterday, we recognize that we may not have reached out yet to all the audiences or stakeholders, the bulk, as I understand, of the user community is actually small, medium enterprises.
I'd like to call on Jacques Decline, Vice President, Asia Road Network and General Manager for YCH Thailand. Jacques heads up YCH's Transportation Division and leads development of YCH's Asia Road Network. He also assumes key leadership role in leading the growth of YCH Indochina region in his current portfolio as General Manager Thailand, where he has full commercial and operational responsibilities through new business acquisitions and key account management and growth. Jacques, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I very much share the view of Michael. We've seen a lot of progress in the area of single window, but it's not even. It's rather uneven amongst the 10 member states. On the other side, it should also be noticed that the supply chain community is also not on the same level in every country, so that should be taken into account as well. In order to progress, we would suggest to start more pilot projects in terms of green lanes to actually test on the ground what's possible and what's not. Despite the presentation earlier on, I don't think it's a real technical challenge. It's more like a cultural challenge where countries need to make changes to processes, traditions, and habits they have created over the years. From a pilot in the Philippines, I've seen that the national single window involved already 30 agencies to have a say in this, and that's a tremendous amount of involvement. How to coordinate that and how to do that in countries like CMLV is quite a challenge. But there the private sector could play a role. Best practices can be applied. In fact, all the data required for a successful Asian window is already available in the supply chain. So it's more like how do we pull all this information together and make it useful for all people involved. However, that creates an issue in terms of security. What data is being stored where, who has access to the data. But there, I would say, there are best practices as well. We could look at certifying users, which companies can be accessed with the right sort of clearance and the right sort of security setup. It is not only a technical challenge, it's a smaller technical challenge, but the real challenge, I believe, is on the road, really on the ground, what's happening there. Having a paperless environment is great, but having to move your container across the border with a crane is just time consuming. However, we are, from YCH, we are also very keen to support any initiative creating a faster resolution. 2015 seems a bit challenging for me, but I think we should look at a framework where the private sector can actively participate in this initiative. For me, the challenge would be how do you structure that framework to make progress on a very short notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacques. Excellent remarks. If I may now call on Mr. Franciscus Welirang, Vice President Director at PT Food. Mr. Welirang was appointed Director of Indofood in 1995 with responsibility for the flour mills operation at Bogasari Division. He has also served in many other positions, as you can read in his bio in your folder. Before that, he was President Commissioner of the Surabaya Stock Exchange from 2001 to October 2007. Mr. Welirang was awarded Higher National Diploma in Chemical Engineering from South Bank Polytechnic in London and Graduate Plastic Institute in '74. Mr. Welirang, go ahead.
Thank you, Rashid. Basically, what we see just now is the presentation on the national single window and ASEAN single window. What I see is from a product that is moving. Basically, what is being presented is it's very important because this is where is the gate between each country, and basically this has been established, and I believe in Indonesia it's already been tested in one of the port, and I think some of it also. Therefore, this application is basically at the gate. At the gate, when we move our goods, probably only 25% of our cost, when we are talking about that balance, that there are more things that we have to see in the value change. Now, when we look at the ASEAN, we'll be always looking, there are 7 countries at the continent, and there are 3 countries that beyond the continent. Now, the connectivity is very important to us to see. There is a land gate, there is a port gate, there is the air gate. That's specific, of course, with the national window and the ASEAN window. This is very good because that can put at one system. But the key, where are the gates later on, that has to be looked at the position. Then when you look at the 3 countries, partially probably, then we have Malaysia, which is partially, you have the Western Malaysia, and then you have Brunei, and you have, which is standalone in Borneo, and you have Indonesia across an archipelago for 10,000 kilometers across. And you have Philippines, which is also an island with Luzon and Mindanao down. So where is the position of the gate position of each country? I think it's very important because we want to see how competitiveness are moving when we are moving our goods along or across the market. So that is one. So this is merely a documentation what we see. We want to see, of course, to see how readiness is the infrastructure on the connectivities. Out of the continents, there will be a connectivities, land and train moving down, up from the north down to Singapore. Cut off that area, then it is moving through the sea. I think the logistic company will look at that. And that is very important for us. And the readiness, I think that is where the position of the private sector, that where it want to move the good, how competitiveness in the position on the value change of it.
And one of the areas I remember New Zealanders would come from the Food Safety Authority of New Zealand, and they were trying to push Egypt to accept e-certificates from the New Zealand Food Safety Authority. And the idea is that if Egypt would accept that e-certificate, then the exports from New Zealand for dairy products and others would be much more simplified, and they could be cleared at the border faster. So I think this is one of the main applications, as I see it, for ASW, or one of the possible applications. This is a G2G exchange, if you will, of an e-certificate. So instead of from New Zealand to Egypt, we're talking about intra-ASEAN at first, and maybe from ASEAN to other trading partners eventually. And so if there is acceptance of an e-certificate in ASEAN, it could speed up trade. We can talk about certificates of analysis, which was mentioned yesterday. So if you have a lab test that's done on an export from Thailand and recognized in Indonesia, that would also speed up clearance at the border. As Pak Wilarang said, of course, there are a lot of challenges to make such things happen. So regulatory harmonization being just one of many, but it is an important area.
Picking up from Mr. Franciscus about I know you are concerned about, because just now the example I show is more on land transport that will only connect the 7 from, Laos and of course, like Philippines, like some of the islands in Indonesia and also Brunei, you will see that maybe the transit will not benefit them so much because it's basically is more on the land transit. So that is why I think even yesterday we had the discussion, we actually identify some of the challenge, and one of them, like I think Michael, you have mentioned pre-arrival information. So that's why I think that is one thing that we need to embark on, because that is where it will apply, whether it's sea, air, land, That is the type of business process that I think our ASW Technical Working Group, after yesterday's symposium, we have really seen what you call the urgency of it, that we will do what you call carry out maybe business analysis to actually proceed with the pre-arrival information. And that I think will benefit all the 10 member states, and also the traders as a whole.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Apthorpe. I'm from TNT and also from the GMS Business Forum. Could I address general concerns? I know Ms. Wong has beaten me to the punch by separating the actual physical movement of the road freight from the system, which is very good because otherwise we'd only be talking about the Singapore-Malaysia border, and there's a lot of other borders in ASEAN. We also might be talking about the Thai-Lao border at Savannakhet and Dan Suan, Lao Bao, which with the EWEC operates reasonably well under their own current system. The recognition of e-commerce does not exist. Well, up until last year, where they did pass legislation early this year that it does exist, but it is not recognised on the ground. So you still have to drive 400 kilometres with a piece of paper and hand it over to the customs officer. So while we have the ASEAN single window up here, we have a lot of things down here that are so far from being even conceptually possible by 2015. I wonder how this can work. Are we actually going to introduce scanners and electronic documents to the borders of Cambodia? Are we going to get the Thai and the Lao customs and border authorities to work under one roof? Because Thailand cannot pass the legislation that allows them to set foot outside their own territory to work across the border, and they cannot allow anybody else's nationals to work on their territory for the customs process. And when we look at Cambodia borders, a national single window is so far from reality before you have an ASEAN single window, where we may have 10 or 15 agencies. We've got CAM control, we've got customs, we've got veterinary, and a single window, they're not even in the same building. They're not in the same town in Hoi Pet. You have to drive 47 kilometres to get a document to allow a truck to move 1 kilometre. So the reality is that they are so far from being there for 2015. Can this actually happen?
Okay, I'm just the question from Renaldi. I'm not expert onto that. Okay, it's basically a logistic, but the issue always between countries at the gate to us. I think that is number one. Then that gate is very important, and at this present moment, there are differences between countries of the gate. Probably the trial will be which gate will be the rate on it. Otherwise, all the logistic services is moving between countries. I think that's what I can comment on.
Thank you, Pat. Let's see. As for the previous set of questions, actually we could probably do a symposium just on that, just on the lessons learned from the pilot that's ongoing right now. As a matter of fact, there have been a few pilots even before this one that involved maybe 2-3 countries trying to work out the kinks in exchanging the certificate of origin, in particular, between countries. And those have been successful to some extent. It also, some lessons were learned from those, not just in the legal side, but also the technical side, especially data standardization and harmonization. As to the current pilot right now, the architecture for this ongoing ASW pilot was endorsed last year. It's between 7 member states, and it's currently being implemented. 6 of the 7 member states have already put or exchanging data on a test basis right now. There are a lot of challenges. I think one of them is legal. So, for example, on the exchange of the certificate of origin, great idea, and people can do it, and it can be done technically. But on the legal side, you still have to have the paper copy, and so that's again, the technology is relatively easy. It's the regulatory aspects that can stand in the way. So there are many other aspects as to where. Let's see. On the national single window side, as everybody has pointed out, some national single windows are perhaps more advanced in the development stage than others. As Paul and others indicated, perhaps the CLMV are a bit further behind, but Vietnam has been making some progress, we understand, at least at the planning stage, and introducing e-customs, working actually with JICA, as I understand. What can dialogue partners do? I think maybe a question best posed to member states as opposed to a contractor for a dialogue partner. If I were to say what are some of the key challenges right now, I think on the legal side, because the legal side, after all the technology and the IT architecture is in place, you still have fundamental problems on the legal side. And it's not just having a regional framework, which we're working on, but at the national level, a lot of work needs to be done in perhaps all the member states. And so you're talking about things as simple as the acceptance of electronic signatures. How do you use can you use electronic evidence in judicial proceedings? Liability issues, what happens if data is lost? Who does the private sector go after? So there are all sorts of issues there. So I think legal framework is very important. Marianne talked about business process analysis and data harmonization. I think if you talk about data standardization and harmonization, I think one of the speakers talked about extremely important. And one can probably read off the list that Michael had in his presentation. So he started with the business process analysis, the data standardization, harmonization, help to shift these gears towards the paperless system, and that involves a lot of things. Broadening the outreach to SMEs and to government agencies that are not as used to electronic processing of data. As we said, public-private consultations to keep encouraging that effort. On that note, if you'll allow me, I want to thank my speaker, Madame Marianne Wong, my excellent panelists. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the next sessions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashid Banjaloon. If we can ask the speaker, moderator, and panelists to remain on stage. We would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Lim Hong Hin to present a token of appreciation to the moderator, the speaker, and the panelists.